Over. So welcome to SCA's Oscars qualified short Q&A session. With me, I have four talented directors. So before we really dive into the Q&A, I would like if you introduce yourself rather than me, because I won't do the justice to it. And if we can know you, not just as a filmmaker, but also as the person who's behind the filmmaker. So I'm going to go with the way that I have the squares aligned in my window. So Vincent, can we start with you?
Yeah, sure. Hi, my name is Tillanas. I'm 27 years old from the Netherlands. I live in Amsterdam, and I'm a writer-director who basically started making films since I was a little kid. And after a detour through different years after high school, I enrolled into film school here in Amsterdam, the Netherlands Film Academy, and I graduated from the directing study in 2018. And I've been trying to make very stories that hit close to home. I talk a lot about Dutch society and Dutch culture and Dutch mannerisms. I try to make films that are as honest as possible that I can make them.
Thank you so much. Michiel, do you want to go next?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Michiel Blanchard. I'm 28 years old. I live in Brussels. I'm born in Belgium, but I grew up in France, in the countryside, very far away from any city. I couldn't even go to a cinema, only on the weekends with my parents when I begged them. So yeah, I watched a lot growing up, a little bit like Vincent. I've been making movies since I'm 7 years old, literally, and I've been watching VHS and American movies mainly all my life, and so that's the kind of cinema that made me wanna do cinema. And so as soon as I could, I went back to Belgium because there are some nice cinema schools there where you can go directly when you're 18 years old, because in France you have to study more before to go in a cinema school, or they're very expensive, etc. So as soon as possible, when I was 18, I went to a cinema school in Belgium, and it went well. And there I had the chance to meet a teacher there who was also a director, who introduced me to his producers and and since then, when I got out of school, I've been working with that producer, and so we did You're Dead, Ellen, which is the short we're going to talk about today.
Thank you. Pablo?
Well, I am weird because I don't study cinema or something. I born in a humble family in Madrid, and always I was be a football player. When I broke my leg, before I were part of my best friends right now is a national team in Spain in football players, are very famous. But my mom to try to control me and my brother put in a role Star Wars like 7 hours per day, and I began to love cinema. And one day when I go to a study like an actor in Toronto, I decided to began to make documentaries. I don't know why, maybe because it's one thing I really want to do. And I began to make documentaries, make my own company. And now the next January is 9 years ago, I formed my company. I produced like 11 films, win awards, European awards and something. And now this is Mama is my last documentary short. I'm really happy to be here.
Thank you. And last but not least, Phumi.
Hi everyone, my name is Pumi Marari. I'm originally from South Africa. I also took a bit of a detour in my journey to being a filmmaker. I first fell in love with cinema in high school, but I studied finance for my bachelor's degree, and I went into investment banking for a few years. And during that time, I felt the itch to go into filmmaking, but I hadn't had anyone in my family with a creative career before. So one of my mentors introduced me to a producer, and I started kind of shadowing him, and soon started working for him. And then I realized I wanted to be more on the writing and directing side. So I applied to film school, and I graduated from there last year. And so the film we're talking about today is my thesis.
Thank you so much for those wonderful introductions. What I would like to do is start with the generic question that all of you can answer, and then we will deep dive into specific about each of the movies. So the question that I want to pose for you is, what is it that inspired you to not just write, discover, or research this movie, but what drove you to make it into a reality? So combine of these two questions. And I'm just going to reverse the order. So Phumi will begin with you.
Okay. So the film is inspired by something that happened to my mom in the 80s with her brother. She saw her brother getting abducted by apartheid police in South Africa, and she had to find a way to save him. And my mom told me the story about 7 years ago, sitting in the kitchen, we're having breakfast, and she kind of told it to me in passing when we were speaking about some stuff that had happened during apartheid. And I was very shocked by it because, firstly, I couldn't see my mom as the person who could confront these very aggressive police. And secondly, I was surprised that it actually worked because she was able to save her brother. And so it caused me to be interested in sort of the things that used to happen in the past to, ordinary people like my family, and also to women. And it also caused me to think about, how do people who are in oppressed positions find their voice when they don't normally have one? Because during that time, my mother, as a Black woman in apartheid South Africa, she would not have had a voice, but somehow she found that voice, and she used it to save her brother. And so that inspired me to write a story about this woman who's finding her voice by protecting her family.
Thank you. Yeah, that's wonderful. Pablo, can we go next with you?
Well, Mama is the beginning of the project because I make a promise many years ago in 2014 to Lorena, one of the main characters. 2 days before I began to shoot in my first feature in Uganda, I met Lorena for the first time, and all began to talk all the night about my background in a war zone, in a refugee camp, his background in a conflict in Congo, and began to talk. And she told me the story of Mama Zawadi. And this is the type of a story to touch you and change your life. And I made the promise to save money and come back to Congo to shooting. And this is the real story. I spent 4 years to come back to Congo because it's a little bit difficult, because it's a complicated place to shoot in, because the guerrilla, the Ebola, and different conflicts. But when I try to make a promise and try to do it, and this is the reason to shoot in this incredible story.
Thank you. Michiel?
Yeah, it's hard to follow those two stories. Yeah, so my movie You're Dead, Ellen, the project came about because there were 2 things I wanted to talk about and explore. One was really simple and intimate, and was to talk about the end of a relationship and the grief of a relationship. So not talking about dead per se, but about saying goodbye to the people we love and how painful it is. And the other thing was I wanted to explore blending of genre, because like I said, I grew up watching a lot of movies and of different genre and loving them all. And I'm kind of obsessed with this idea of how can we create something new, something fresh, exciting? What's the future of cinema, while paying homage to all those movies that nourished me? And so I'm obsessed by mixing those elements in a surprising way, because I think that the audience is sophisticated enough now to change genre in the middle of the film, like we can see in Korean cinema a lot, for example. And so those two ideas came together very well. So I could talk about this this love story, the ending of this love story. And so it goes through, the movie goes through the different stages of grief in a weird kind of way. And I take advantage of that to switch from one genre to another. So we begin more in the romantic comedy, and then it goes into a little bit into horror, and it ends with a more emotional note. So we have kind of the denial, the anger, the acceptance. So yeah.
Yes, thank you so much. And Vincent.
Yeah, so for me, the start of Marlon Brando was really the desire to write about queer teenagers and gay youth beyond acceptance, either self-acceptance of their surroundings. I mean, there are beautiful short and long films made about the subjects that serve beautiful purposes and tell beautiful stories, but I was missing those stories myself when I grew up, and I wanted to talk about those lives actually, and I want to talk about the platonic relationships that queer people have with each other, that and the safety that they find within those relationships. And while, you know, conceptualizing the film, I had to admit that while I also had gained many relationships in my life, there were also the ones that disappeared. And I think what sets friendship breakups apart from romantic relationships is that there is never an official moment really where it happens. It kind of bleeds out over a period of time, which is often very painful. All of a sudden you kind of lose track of each other. And I think those elements really made this film for me urgent to write and urgent to make.
Yes, wonderful. When all of you were talking about your film, I could imagine what was going behind when I saw the movies. So thank you so much. I think what I'm going to do now is we'll go movie by movie, just deep dive into the stories. So I'm going to just randomly go in an order. So Pablo, I think we'll start with you. As I think one of the questions that I had was, you are from Spain, and the story of Mama Zawadi is from Congo. What steps did you take to retain the authenticity and genuineness in the movie, because it comes through? So what was going on when we were trying to get Mama Zawadi's story across the screen and in as pure form as it is, as I can see right now?
The way of the more like the point of view.
So I think the point of view, as well as the way it is on the screen, the way it comes off, it's genuine and it like hits you. So I just wanted to know, what steps did you take to ensure that it didn't get diluted?
Well, sometimes when you do make a documentary sort of, or you work in documentaries normally, or maybe you are a filmmaker, always you need to be, you know, some kind of alert sensation, because all the stories is around you, and it's crazy because when I talked with Lorena, one of the main characters of the documentary short, she told me many times nobody want to tell this story. And I feel if I don't make the story, it's a kind of a story nobody know. You know, it's like a tree goes down to in the middle of the forest, and you don't know if make a sound or no. It's the same. And I think it's a powerful story. And for me, sometimes I feel comfortable, not comfortable, but some people talk to me about why a white guy for a European guy travel for Africa to tell the story. And I feel sometimes uncomfortable to say, because maybe I'm the only person to have the possibility to go for Congo to shoot in the story. And maybe in the same kind of way, maybe I am the only person to put his life and the life of his team in risk to tell the story. But this is my point of view about the story. And I tried, this is a reason to don't make a fiction film. This is a try to make a documentary fiction. And I try to be really specific with the story of Mama Zawadi. And always talk with Mama. Mama, when you want to talk, make the interview. Always if you want to talk to me. And this is a, you know, it's a special kind of relationship. But in the same time, always, and I think, I don't know, the rest of my partners, but always if you want to make a cinema, always you put some kind of your body, your feeling and everything on your short film, you know, on your film. It's part of yours in your film. And I think maybe not as a part of the story of Mama Zawadi, but I think always try to say, for me, my documentary is about love. And I think love is the most powerful weapon right now. And I try to make this kind of the story. If I am the right person to tell the story, I don't know. Always I try to make the same story. It's like, you know, I know I am the director, but I don't feel alone. I have a huge team, an amazing team behind me, an incredible team. And I think the more powerful thing is everybody want to tell the same story and support my point of view. And that's it. I don't know if I answer your question or I go for another way.
You did answer the question. It's like, I think what you said was that you let Mama Zawadi tell you the story herself rather than asking her. I think that comes through. But what you also mentioned was something that actually interested me. So when you went to Congo to shoot, so you know that in the environment that you were going through was an uncertain environment. So when as a filmmaker, you're trying to go into an environment that is not safe or is risky, what is it that, how challenging was it? And what was going at the back of your mind, you know, to keep the crew safe, the film safe, and, you know, to get this story?
In the reality, try to be a little bit kamikaze, you know, because it's not a lot. It's, you know, I don't know what I'm thinking about my partners, but when you make a short, everything is a problem. The phone is a problem. The money is a problem. The day is a problem. The rain is a problem. The camera is everything is a problem. You as director, you need be the captain of this ship in the middle of the storm and try to control everything. But always is like, and sometimes I talk with my team and say, please guys, follow me and trust in me. And sometimes I really don't know what I do. But because if you begin to thinking about go for Congo with guerrilla, a really violent guerrilla, really close, it's like a 5-6 kilometers behind you, really violent guerrilla, and really dangerous. You don't have the permit to shoot in because you have a lot of problems. You have, in the reality, you never, if you have to, you try to be intelligent, you don't go to Congo to shoot in. And some kind of way, I think filmmakers, they are really clever because normally the people work in a bank with money and have an incredible life, and us try to make cinema, and cinema sometimes is complicated. And maybe this reason say, okay, this is a big problem. Okay, I do it. That's it. Sometimes you don't need to thinking about what is the kind of way to confront the problem to finish the short film, or finish the future, or finish the fiction. You need to do it because you believe in the project. And I think the rest of my partners is the same. Have to confront a lot of problems, and the only thing is try to do the best to the audience.
All right, thank you so much. That was helpful. And so the one last question that I would want to ask. So I think when you started this movie, or when you got this movie, was Mama Zawadi's story going to be a part of it, or is it that it was added later? When you met her, that is when you realized that her story needs to be incorporated in that story?
No, I go directly to shooting with Mama. But the process is a violent story because you talk about sexual aggression, really violent and really difficult story. If this story happened in any first world, you know, Europe or America, it's in all the newspaper, all the news. But right now in Africa, the rest of the people don't look Africa. And this is an incredible story. And I told the first day with Mama, okay, I really want to share with you the story about your silent therapy and why you work with the baby chimpanzee. And when you want, and if you want, tell me your story, I'm ready. And I think the 7th day of shooting in Congo, one night, tell me, okay, Pablo, I'm ready. And I make only 2 questions in an interview for 3 hours. And Mama tell me all the story of his life. And it's incredible. My problem is go for the editing room to reduce 3 hours for 8 minutes. And this is a new battle. But, you know, I think it's a relationship always. I'm trying to don't write or trying to make a script or make idea. No, I try to be always open my eyes and open my ears and listen. You know, this is one of the things I learned when I go to a war zone or refugee camp. Don't try to make I think it's impossible. Sometimes you make your own film like you're writing the script, and you know, although you have a problem. And I think it's part of the process. And I think in some kind of way it's so beautiful because in these problems, I think it's part of the cinema.
Wow. That was a wonderful explanation about how you went on the process. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. I think next I'm going to go to Vincent. So I know that you must have been asked this question multiple times, but why is this film called Marlon Brando? And to add to that, was Marlon Brando a part of the story when you conceptualized it, or was the decision added at a later moment? On mute.
Thank you. It started pretty early. The film is based on a few relationships that I've had, and one of my best friends, she was the biggest Marlon Brando fan, and she introduced me really to his cinema, but also just his appeal, his sexiness, and she would just go on and on about him, and I fell in love with Marlon Brando through her. So I always, when writing this, I always knew like I like that idea of finding commonality in this you know, cultural idol. And well, what basically happened was in the beginning, the story had both perspective equally. There were 2 equal, we had her POV and his POV, and we decided to focus on one POV only to tell the story. And what truly became an aha moment, so to say, is just, it's our main character being clingy and being very independent, and its journey to independence, which to me, Marlon Brando is such an icon of, and that it's no coincidence that in the end of the film, Marlon Brando, or that our main character is dressed in a white t-shirt and jeans, as if you were being in a streetcar named Desire, as this full, you know, Marlon Brando character that can go off and walk away into the sunset. And I think what also really helped the decision was that I discovered only later that Marlon Brando is also was a big influence of the butch look for the lesbian community in the 70s, who created this image of independence and female empowerment that was partially inspired by also James Dean and Marlon Brando. So I was like, wow, we have this, and Marlon Brando by himself also having this ambiguous sexuality and freedom. There were all these elements that almost made it impossible for the film not to be called Marlon Brando. And it was always there from the beginning, but it grew. it was through the writing that he became, every single draft, he became bigger and bigger, and we just knew that was the film.
Okay, wow. Oh, so I think taking a little bit from the answer that I got. So when I think in some of the interviews that I've seen, that the characters that you've carved, it comes from the place of, you. So you are Cass and you are Naomi. So how did you decide to distinguish these two, because they come from the same place? So how did you decide to segregate them as two individuals that we see in the movie?
Yeah, so I wrote the girl's perspective, or the girl who wants to leave her hometown and say goodbye to her friendship, or want to say like, hey, I'm leaving and it's fine. It's just, I'm gonna choose for myself here. That was my situation in high school. But then when I, went on my own journey, it kind of backfired, and I found myself alone in this college experience that was supposed to be so social and so cool and so fun. And I found myself, celebrating alone in my room, not really knowing anyone. And I think I understand, while writing this, I understood both characters and conflict of desires so well. And I feel by making them very clear, just one person being the romantic one who wants to hang on to a romantic and warm feeling for as long as possible, I can relate to now. I think growing up more, or being the age that I am, I can relate to more, maybe that I couldn't have at that age, but I still knew what was the desire also to leave. And so, yeah, I think because I'm a bit older now, I could really separate the two, but also really understand the two. And that's how I wrote it.
Wow. Okay. Thank you. And so I think one of the questions that I wanted to ask was, I saw in your previous interviews that sound design was very important for you in this movie, and that kind of lifted your movie. So what were your influences for the sound design, and how did you go about, getting the sound that you have right now incorporated in the movie?
It's mostly documentaries that influence my sound design. I always wanted to grasp, like, why do some films feel so phony, and why do some films feel so real? And this is just my own one of the artistic things that I like to dive into. And I was really curious to what does your high school sound like, and what does your bedroom sound like? And that meant that we wanted to record as many diegetic sounds as possible, but also that the entire soundscape of the film had to be very documentary. So their voices aren't too close and perfect. The room has a noise. There's cars and things outside, because we shot it in my hometown, and I want that town to feel realistic, and not everything had to be grounded in those locations, because it's a story about youth, and youth is always very grounded in locations. And so I feel like going from documentary and how a documentary sound, always incorporates their direct environment into the soundscape. We try to recreate that and make the film therefore a bit more grounded in both reality, location, and a sort of feeling that we could always recognize the places that we experience ourselves.
Wow. So I mean, getting influence from documentary is something that is very nice to know. It's kind of different for narrative filmmaking. So I think the coming from the theme of your movie, and I just want to know how it's kind of deep. We actually, when I was listening to you, I realized that no friendship has an official ending. What you said was so right. It's just we drift apart, and then suddenly a few years later, you're like, oh my goodness, we have drifted apart. How did it hit you? How did that? Because I was listening to you, that is when I was like, oh yes, that has happened to me too. So
how that literally hit me?
Yeah.
Well, it hit me that I sometimes, like everyone else, I see friends from high school pass by on bikes here in Amsterdam or on the train, and I see them and they don't see me, and I'm like, you know, do I say hi? No, I'm just here to observe. And I mean, we all know we're in filmmaking, and filmmaking is also a weird, lonely job. So it all happened through me being probably a bit egocentric in the way that I'm like, I'm gonna do film. That is the only thing I really want right now, and therefore not really knowing how to always be there for my friends, which I really regret. But it's also, I think, now that I've really learned over time that sometimes or you have to, you know, go through painful situations to learn what it means for other people and for yourself to have relationships. And yeah, through tough confrontations, I think, as well, and also just the painful realizations that me and my friends grew apart at some point. It both hit me, and I think I've learned from it.
All right, thank you. Thank you, that's wonderful. So I'm going to move to the next movies, Your Dead Helen. So Michiel, to you, I think from your introduction, as I heard that you were greatly influenced by the Hollywood directors. So how did that impact your filmmaking journey? And was Your Dead Helen influenced by that too? I know that you mentioned it, but can you let us know more about it?
Yeah, I don't know if there is very much to say. Yeah, I like I said, I grew up watching a lot of Hollywood movie, and as I grew older, I expanded my horizon and my inspirations. Yeah, like I know the first movie I ever saw in my life was Jurassic Park. I know it. I know I saw it before I was 4 years old. It's the only memory I have from when I lived in Belgium when I was really young. And then the first movie I saw in cinemas was like Spider-Man, Sam Raimi Spider-Man was also like Sam Raimi one a big influence on me. And I don't know, I love and the thing is my tastes have changed, but I do like the using big stories and the evocative power of cinema and movie making to talk about human things and human experience and very subtle and simple things. I kind of feel like there are two, either you make a really subtle movie to talk about really big important things, or you do a really intense movie to talk about really subtle emotions. And I kind of like that, like doing a big spectacle, being generous with your audience. Like the two main things I keep in mind always when I'm making a project is be generous and be sincere. And as long as I follow those two roles, I know I'm gonna be fine, and I'm gonna make something that feels true to me, and that I will not be bullshitting anybody. And the idea is, yeah, be bold, make it. I'm not saying that every movie should be big, and my movie isn't. It's not a big. It's quite a contained story. It's not a Hollywood blockbuster or anything. But I mean, I like to use the element of genre and the language of cinema, and then in a subtle way use it to evoke real emotions and people things that people really can connect to. And I kind of like that, the idea of kind of distracting the audience with an exciting story, and then when they don't expect it, they're hit by the substantial theme of the movie, or by just a line or something that impact them very hard. And I like that, like people are not, because if you announce too soon that there is this big theme you want to address, or if that's something that intimidates me, I think also, like I'm afraid to say, okay, now I'm doing a movie about this really important subject. That's something that's a very good way to go about it. I have no doubt, but it's not the way I work, and I need it to be hidden into a quote unquote spectacle. So yeah, I think that's how it influenced me and my way of telling stories.
And so I think you mentioned about genres and, you know, trying to distract the audience. So when I was watching the movie, I thought it was going to be a comedy. I didn't read about it, so it was comedy, and then it turned into a horror, and then it went to a drama. So when you were actually writing about it, were you thinking of amalgamation of this all genres, or how did you go about capturing all of them in the short movie that you have?
Um, I did know that I wanted that. It's something I'm working on all the time. I know that's something I'm obsessed with, mixing genre and surprising the audience. But I don't write like that. Wasn't a guiding line for me when I was writing. The guiding line is the story and the characters. And like I said earlier, I want to be generous with each scene and each situation. And so if I feel that a situation better serves the story if it's funny, I'm really gonna uh, um, go ahead with it and not holding back anything. Sorry, my English isn't perfect, but so yeah, and I go for it. And then if the next scene I think it's supposed to be moving or very sad or intimate, then I'm gonna do it also. And if then I think, yeah, now what I want to use to, for in this instance, to express how terrifying it is to me to end a relationship, say goodbye to someone you love, then I'm like, okay, why not use the genre elements of horror to, in a weird way, talk about that, about how terrifying it is. So let's terrify your audience. And it's a bit convoluted and weird, but that's how my brain works, and I like to use those things to tell a story. So yeah, again, it's about being generous and sincere with the moment. So as long as it comes from the character and their emotional journey, I'm happy to go far into any genre within the same story. And there is this thing in cinema school. They were trying. It was really important to my teacher to maintain the same tone during a movie, like tonal. Um, sorry,
Yeah.
consistency. And that's something that kind of bothered me, because it felt like a good advice, but then I was like, no, that's not what I want to explore. And I like this idea of, yeah, surprising the audience, and as long as it's true to the story, I think it works. And like I said, I'm very obsessed with Korean cinema, and Bong Joon-ho, for instance, who did that in almost all his movies. And Memories of Murder is one of my favorite movies ever. And it's there's some moments that are completely even burlesque and really slapstick funny, and then 1 second later it's terrifying, and then it's you're crying. And yeah, I like that.
I could see that. So I think this is a question that I wanted to ask. And I know that your story had, because dancing was incorporated, in your story. It was like the main character wanted to start talking about dancing, and it comes in the middle, and it also is like the final moment where, the separation happens and you go about dancing and music. So how did that enter the storyline?
That was the thing was so the main problem that I wanted to show the characters, their personalities. So she's really bold and out there, and she want to do stuff all the time, and he's more reserved and self-conscious and more quiet. And so that's why when she was still alive, they were a great couple. Like, they made each other better. Like, she gave him her energy, and she took him places, and he was more helping her ground herself and be connected to their emotion and talk. Like, that's how they were a great couple. But now that she is a ghost, basically nobody else but him sees her. And now what made them great is making them worse, because she's even more out there and outrageous because nobody can see her, so she doesn't care about anything. And he's even more afraid and self-conscious because now he's afraid to look crazy. And how can he make this relationship work when he's the only one seeing her? And so the concept was, what could be an element that at the end of the movie would be him proving that he has grown through the movie, and now he doesn't care about what anybody will think, and he's ready to make this gift to her, which is a dance. And he has been through hell through the entire movie, and at the end he's just in his underwear bleeding and he doesn't care about anything anymore except expressing his deep sincere love for her. and he does this act. So that was to me the way to show the main character's evolution.
All right, thank you. And so the last question that I have for you right now is like, I was told that your movie is in talks to be developed as a feature. I understand that you cannot tell a lot of stuff here, but can you share with us the process of how did you go from shot to now making it to a feature-length process, especially from a student and alumni who will be hearing? I think that would be interesting to know.
Yeah, normally it's gonna be announced very soon, so I don't know what I can say yet. I think I can, but just to be sure, I'm not gonna go into details. But yeah, it was kind of a really surprising journey, because yeah, like I'm here in my little room in Brussels. Belgium is a great place to make movies, but we don't have an industry. The kind of movies I want to make are very difficult to make. They're expensive, and here we don't have the resource to do that. Our movies don't make money most of the time, and it's just funded by the government, and it's about the cultural voice of Belgium. I mean, there isn't like an industry, and but long story short, so I won a prize when the short finally was made, came out in the middle of the pandemic, in a fantastic film festival in France that has a good reputation. And then a manager called me from Los Angeles, actually a French guy who lives as a manager there, and which is amazing is he is the manager also of Bong Joon-ho, which was really exciting to hear. He wrote to me on Facebook like, "Oh, I'm the manager of Bong Joon-ho. Congrats! Could I see your short?" And I'm like, "Yeah, sure, you can." And so he liked it, and we talked about it, and he told me what were my next project, and one of my feature projects was adapting it into a feature, and my dream was to do it in New York, because that's how the movie is in my head already. It's shot in Brussels, but to me it's New York, you know. And we talked about all the directors that I love and production company that I liked, and he basically sent the short to all of them. And for the next 3 months, I did 3 Zooms a day, and I met great people. And now I don't know if I'm allowed to say, so I'll just say that one of my heroes is gonna produce it. So I mean, it's really early stages. The movie isn't written yet. It's not greenlit yet. We are looking now for someone to help me write it. But yeah, that was the journey. Very lucky, and it all happened in this room in front of this computer for the last 6 months or so.
Terrific. Thank you for sharing that with us. And Phumi, so I'm going to go towards When the Sun Set. So you did mention about this story coming from the kitchen of your home where you're talking to your mom, and that's how it came to you. So I'm just straight away going to jump into a question of, when you're writing or when you were casting in the story, how easy or difficult was it? Because easy from the standpoint that you knew the story, you knew the actual characters, and difficult is to keep it in the narrative form. So how it was for you to balance this out in your story?
Yeah, so when I was writing it, it was important for me to find my own way into the story. Like with it not just being about my mother's story. So for me, the thing that connected was the idea of a woman who doesn't feel like she has a voice, and her journey to find it. And I was in a similar space in my own life. I was feeling afraid to fully express myself, and I wasn't feeling like I could share my voice in a way that I was comfortable or confident about. And so in a way, I kind of infused that part of myself into the story as well. And I also was interested. So when I was thinking about what I wanted to do with my thesis, one of my professors said, you should write about the things that haunt you. And this story of my mother haunted me because I had thought about the different scenarios that could have happened to her. Like, for example, what if she never found her brother? What if something bad had happened to him? What if something bad had happened to her? The writing of the story was helping me to kind of explore that as well, to just explore the world and the various things that could have happened. And so a lot of the story, I would say 80% is fiction, and it's me exploring that kind of stuff. And there are characters that come into the story who the horrible version of the story has happened to. So for example, the woman in the hospital looking for her son who's disappeared, and that's one of the scenarios I imagined could have happened to my uncle or my mother's brother. And even the way that the scene at the end, where she fights for her brother, plays out, it's not exactly the way it happened to my mom, but it's sort of my imagination of like the things that could have happened. And so that was the way that I was able to kind of separate it a little bit from just being about my mother, so that I could infuse myself into it, and also so that other people could also hopefully find their way into it. And when I was casting as well, I wasn't looking for somebody who looked like my mother. I was just looking for somebody that I felt could embody this character and her journey.
Great. Uh, Thank you so much for sharing that. So this is your thesis film, and which you decided to make in overseas, and this is kind of unheard of. Most of the thesis, the student won't try to make it in the location. So during the process, did you ever go through pros and cons of making it here versus there? And if so, what cemented that decision? And I'm sorry, I cannot do much about the car that is blaring outside, but kind of what made you cement the decision of going, leaving where you're studying and going to a location where the movie should be made?
Yeah, it's funny because it was this back and forth decision that I was making with my producer. So when I partnered with my producer, we had already been thinking we want to shoot this in South Africa, but yes, it's a student film, it's a historic film. So the idea of trying to shoot a historic film internationally was quite a big feat in terms of budget, and in terms of just the logistics as well. So we had a lot of conversations about it. We spoke to a lot of our mentors as well, and the conclusion for us was that in order to have authenticity of place and people and language, we needed to shoot it in South Africa. That was the best way to capture, because the sort of environment is part of the character of the film as well, and there's no way to really recreate it. And we had a lot of suggestions on places in and around LA that we might be able to cheat as South Africa, but the more and more we investigated that, the more we realized we actually had to go there physically. And so when we decided to go there to shoot, we did a lot of networking. So my producer and I did 2 trips to South Africa where we kind of did soft pre-production and networked a lot, met a lot of people and producers to find help and resources to help us shoot there. The local film school in Johannesburg called AFTA also helped us. And so I think over the course of about a year, we gathered the funds and the resources and community in South Africa to help us shoot the film.
Oh, that must have been an enormous effort as a student thesis. So I'm going to go with the title of the movie. So I know that the title of the movie is a known song. And so what made you select this song, and how did it relate to your story or the message that you were trying to pass?
So the song LAKUTSHON ILANGA is actually, it was written in the script quite early on in like the early drafts. And I'd had it at the end of the script. And the reason why I put that song in is because when I was thinking about my mother and what could have happened to her brother, I thought of what if she had never found him and she was sort of just wondering what had happened to him. And that song came to mind because the song it's kind of a poetic lament of someone who is waiting for their loved one who has disappeared and just doesn't know where they are, and they go looking for them in the streets and the hospitals and everything, and they just can't find them, and they're just waiting indefinitely. And so I had thought of, my mom could have been that person in that song having that lament over her brother. And so even the character, the protagonist's journey, she kind of sort of explores elements of the song as well in her journey, because she goes searching for her brother everywhere, same as the person in the song. And there's a character, the mother in the hospital looking for her son. She kind of, the places she says she's been to look for him are kind of what is referred to in the song as well. And so it was a good way for me to explore, what could have happened. And it also was a tribute in a way to those who remain disappeared, because to this day there are thousands of South Africans from that time who were abducted and remain disappeared. And so having that song at the end is kind of a lament over those people as well.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing this. I think we're nearing the end time. As a student, yes, Vincent.
No, sorry, Puma. I'm just really curious. How was it for your family to see the film? What was their reaction?
Well, my mom, she said that she hadn't fully realized the danger that she had put herself in until she watched, the fight scene playing out. And she said that it finally dawned on her the things that could have happened to her, and that, she might not be here to this day. And then she also said that she was surprised that I didn't live through that time, but it felt like that time. So I was grateful for all of the archival footage that I had watched that hopefully helped to contribute to that. And then my uncle, he said something similar to my mom in the sense that he hadn't realized what his sister had sort of, that the fact that she had put her life on the line for him. And I think maybe because both of them, it was so traumatic that they kind of put it at the back of their minds and tried to forget about it. But watching the film made them realize how lucky they both were to have survived that.
Thank you. Wow, it's beautiful.
Thank you.
That is. So I think before I end, is there any parting thoughts that you want to share with the audience who will be watching this? None. All right. So I think, so thank you for the audience who are going to see this Q&A for joining us. And I hope they enjoyed the shots like I did. I was emotionally involved and moved by each one in a very different manner. And thank you to the filmmakers for honoring us with your presence and allowing us and me to step into the world of your vision and how did you come out about the story. So it was so great to hear from all of you. Thank you. Thank you. It was a delight talking to all of you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me, having us.
Thank you so much.